All right, thank you everyone for coming in today. Happy to have you here. Happy to be talking about this great project that I've been a part of. And so, yeah, I'm here today on behalf of the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whales National Marine Sanctuary. And as Mahialani has already said, my name is Nicholas Joly, and I'm the project manager for the Ocean Count. I've been in this position for the past several months, and yeah, it's been a great experience I'm happy to share today. Okay, so yeah, a little bit about the project. I'm sure some of you, I'm sure some of you know who have already participated in the project. Our humpback whales, they migrate to Hawaii each year from approximately December until April. And during that time is when we conduct the Sanctuary Ocean Count. And basically what it is a shore-based census conducted by citizen science-based volunteers, and they conduct it 3 times per year. And we use that information to inform management at the sanctuary and to provide education and outreach and to raise awareness for humpback whales and the protection of this species in Hawaii. Okay, so today what we're going to be talking about, I'll go a little bit into the sanctuary itself and why it has been and how it has been protecting humpback whales in Hawaii since its creation in 1992. I'll also be giving you some background information on humpback whales that we believe to be very important for the structure of our project. And it's the same information that we provide to our volunteers and site leaders before they conduct the count. So it's really great information if you haven't been exposed to it yet. And from there, we're going to be talking about Ocean Count, basically the format of our project, some features of our project, and some of the work that we've been doing. We'll explain the different facets of the project as well. And then finally from there, we'll be going into the data that we've collected recently and also over the past several years as we've begun to collect it. I'll go over the different types of data that we collect, the different methods for collecting it. And then finally, I'll give you some of our preliminary results and show you what we've been learning from this project over the years. Okay, so there she is. It's a humpback whale. Hawaiian name Kahala. And one of the first things we like to emphasize is the size of the animals that we're looking at. And so right here, as is written, they can be anywhere from 30 to 40 feet, sometimes even larger. And the calves themselves are probably about 1/3 of the length of their mother when they're born. So they're anywhere from like 15 to 20 feet. And so as I'll explain later when we talk about how our project is structured, it's important to know the differences in the sizes of these animals so that we can, whenever possible, distinguish between the adults and the calves. Okay, there you have a humpback whale on its side with its pectoral fin in the air. And as you can see, it's 15 feet in length, which is 1/3 the length of its body. And so it's no surprise how it got its binomial nomenclature, the great winged New Englander. As you can see, if you imagine you were one of the first people observing and you see these large fins pointing out of the water, that would be definitely something that stuck with you. And the dorsal fin coming in at a staggering 1 foot. Contrary to popular conception, that's not where they get their name. They're not called humpbacks because of that small little hump of a fin on their back, but it's actually that hump-like rolling motion that they do when they go down for a dive. But it's still a prominent feature, and sometimes you notice, I think it's somewhat visible on this bottom left-hand one, that they can get a little bruised up and a little scarred from when there's competitive behaviors between the males. So that's another feature that can help identify between different humpback whales. And then finally, we have the caudal peduncle. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's actually that muscle extending along the bottom half of the whale. And believe it or not, it's actually the strongest muscle in the animal kingdom. If you've had the opportunity to go out whale watching with us and you've seen these giant animals propelling their entire bodies out of the water, it's entirely done through that one muscle right there. So it's an incredibly strong and efficient muscle. And also they use it for the entire migration down to Hawaii. So it's very impressive, I would say. And then we have the flukes. And then you might be surprised to know there's actually no bones within the fluke at all. It's mostly cartilage. So yeah, flukes, otherwise known as the tail, about 15 feet across. And that sticks with the whole proportionality of the humpback whales. 15-foot pec fin, 45-foot length. They also have a 15-foot fluke. And you'll notice that the coloration on there, it's unique to each individual. So around the time they're born until about 2 years, that unique fingerprint, as it might be referred to as, is sort of setting and becoming permanent. And it can be a sort of passive way to distinguish between humpback whales. And so each one, some are dark colored, some have swirls. Everyone is different, just like our fingerprints. Yep, and there you can see examples of the different colorations on there. And as they go for their dive, this is often one of the last sights you'll see. So it's a very, very telling mark of the different animals. Like I said, it's a benign research technique. And things we can learn from that by identifying the different animals when they're surfacing. You can get an estimate of how big the population is, where they're moving, and also their life history. Much like the dorsal fin, this can also get scarred up and marked from their different encounters. So tells a lot about the animal. And getting into a little bit of the behaviors, I've chosen specifically to focus on the ones that we cover in the ocean count, and I'll explain the reasons behind that later. But we're going to cover a few specific behaviors that sort of trademarks of humpback whales, which are known to be one of the most acrobatic and surface-oriented of the marine mammals. And so right here, you'll see probably one of the most trademark and distinguishing characteristics of a humpback whale, which is their below. And you can see here, you might be hard-pressed to find the actual number, but in this photo, there might be anywhere between 6 to 7 humpback whales as visible from the belows. You can see the 3 prominent ones up front, and then there's also 3 or 4 lesser ones in the background. So that's one of the ways in our project that we use to estimate the numbers of humpback whales at a site, is by the number of belows. And 300 miles an hour, so that's an impressive feat right there. So each exhale is coming out at 300 miles an hour. Yeah, very impressive. I imagine if you or I did that, we'd probably get lifted off the ground. But okay, and yeah, they also, much like us, they have nares, which would be resembled or similar to our nostrils. And those nares are predominantly in a closed state, so they have to actually exercise their muscles to open the nares, and that would be how they breathe at the surface. And then they retract, or they don't retract, they close off when they go in for dives, so they don't take in any water. And as I mentioned, this is one of the techniques we use to identify or to estimate the population numbers, but it's also useful for distinguishing between adults and calves. Calves, they're younger, they have a smaller lung capacity, they're breathing more frequently. So calves, they may be coming to the surface anywhere from every 3 to 5 minutes, whereas adults, they're staying down longer on average, might be 7 to 15 minutes, and then they also have the larger spout on the top. So that's one way to tell. And this is actually, I think, an interesting photo because you can actually see the 2 different plumes of air coming off from the 2 different nares, which I think is a very interesting shot. Yeah. We have a lot of great photos in this presentation. Ed Lyman, he does our entanglement stuff on Maui, and he gets some really great photos, so I'm happy to include those, and you'll see a few of them today. And the breach, probably everyone's favorite behavior. Very impressive, definitely breathtaking if you get the chance to see it. And yeah, it's basically the whale using that caudal peduncle and its forward momentum to propel its whole upper torso out of the water. And that one right there is a younger calf breaching in. Yeah, definitely seems to be enjoying it. It's really, we don't know for certain why they're doing this. It could be play behavior, could be a form of communication, might even be aggression. We're just not 100% certain. I've also heard that it's used for grooming as well. Just the force of that whole act is helpful for grooming, defensive, or maybe even to stun prey. There's a number of things that it could be. Definitely one of the more interesting of their behaviors. And they have the tail slap, which is basically through that rolling motion, slapping down of the flukes on the surface of the water. This first one you can see, if you can follow my mouse, this is the upper side of the whale. This is the lower side, so that's a tail slap, the tail coming down onto the surface. And then this is an inverted tail slap, because this right here is the underside of the whale. This is the up half, and it's sort of engaging that whipping motion coming full circle. So there's the 2 different types of slaps. And the head lunge, using its entire forward momentum to propel itself out of the water. Yeah, It's a very impressive photo. I almost think it looks like almost like a dinosaur in this photo, but yeah. And then you can see on the top here, you get a pretty good view of the nares on the top. It's its nostrils. And then from here, that's its jawline. And then its eye is actually located right down here towards the bottom part of the jaw. And then unfortunately, I didn't have the slides in this one due to time, but you can see when it is feeding, it has the ability to unhinge its whole lower jaw and detach it from its skull. And it actually has these features called ventral pleats. So the whole thing will fill up almost like a giant fishing net for it to get the most amount of fish as possible when it's feeding. So it's really a sight to see. Okay, so yeah, humpback whales, they're in Hawaii now, but they're not always in Hawaii. They're coming here from Alaska. And the reason they're in Alaska, that's their feeding grounds. They're there during the summertime when they have those nutrient blooms, and they're just basically getting as fat as they can, eating as much as they can to prepare for this migration down to Hawaii. And then if I were to guess whether they're sprinters or marathon runners, it would definitely be a marathon because they're only going about 3 to 8 miles per hour the entire time. And it's the steady, constant 4 to 6 week migration down to Hawaii. And they're here for breeding, for raising their calves, and for giving birth. So Hawaii is considered one of the most important places for this North Pacific stock of humpback whales. Yeah, so 3,000 miles. It's a long trip. And so there's an illustration of it. These are the areas that they're coming from through the Aleutian Islands. And then there's sort of, you see that bottleneck straight down to Hawaii. And out of all of the winter breeding areas, Hawaii has the largest concentration of this North Pacific stock of humpback whales. So it's a really important area for that, I would say. And then the next slide, you can see some of the other areas where they're visiting. The west coast of North America, over to East Asia, but predominantly coming to Hawaii. Okay, and so this is the densities of humpback whales in the Hawaiian Islands. These were done from aerial sightings between 1993 and 2003. And so you can see the yellow is the outer limits of the study, and these red areas are each, we had a separate map, but basically each red dot was a sighting of a humpback whale. And so you can see these dark red clusters, that's where we have the highest concentrations of humpbacks. And so you can see, as I'll show later, we've sort of structured the sanctuary boundaries to be in these high concentration areas. And so typically they're in coastal waters. November to May would be pretty much the outer limits of their stay here. And the peak season, which is when we conduct the ocean count, is from January to March. Okay, so the sanctuary. Yeah, it's very important for the protection of these animals and also for the spreading of information and for perpetuating this a culture of conservation in Hawaii. And so why is it here? Like, what is the need for it? Well, the humpback is listed as depleted under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It's endangered under the Endangered Species Act, and it's been considered a resource of concern for the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. So all of these are reasons why the sanctuary exists and why it's an important resource. And so it's not on its own, it's part of a system. There are 13 total marine sanctuaries, 1 marine national monument, and covering an impressive 170,000 square miles. And so it goes as far north as Washington State and as far south as the Florida Keys, as far east as Lake Huron, and as far west as American Samoa. So it's very comprehensive. And what is it doing? It's protecting marine areas, engaging in management, research, and education. Okay, so ours in particular, if you remember that slide earlier where we had the densities of humpback whales, these are our sanctuary boundaries. So these are areas where we're able to regulate and protect humpback whale resources. And so here in Oahu, right out there is one of them currently off the southeast side, and then we have the North Shore as well, and a little bit of the East Shore. It was designated by Congress in 1992, has 5 separate areas throughout the Hawaiian Islands, and it extends to that 100-fathom isobath. It's a matter of depth predominantly, so that's about 600-foot depth around the islands. And one of the reasons that is because humpbacks prefer those shallow coastal waters for their purposes. And so in total in Hawaii, it's 1,370 square miles, and it's the product of joint cooperation between the state of Hawaii and NOAA. So what might the sanctuary be doing? Like, what is its purpose? What are we getting out of it? Well, we're engaging in research. We have numerous education outreach projects and also resource protection such as disentanglements and strandings. And I would say that the sanctuary ocean count by and far would extend into the education and research sections of that. So that is where we find ourselves today. So that's us right there, sanctuary ocean count. That's a wonderful photo taken at our Turtle Bay site by one of our site leaders. I think this was during the January count. And so what is the project? What are we doing? For one, it's an opportunity for residents and visitors alike to participate in natural resource conservation. It can serve as a tool to supplement scientific information about humpback whales and their populations and their behaviors. It can provide insight into how they're using our waters and for how long and for what reasons. And also, and one of the most important ones I would think, is raising public awareness. It's a great public outreach event. It's predominantly a community outreach event, and it does a great job of that, I would say. Okay, so started way back in 1996. This is actually our 20th anniversary this year. We're celebrating, so it's been around for a little while. That was on Oahu. Shortly thereafter, moved to Hawaii Island in 1999, Kauai in 2000, and then from 2002 to 2010, it was on Kaho'olawe. We had a site out there as well. Since it started, we've engaged more than 20,000 volunteers. They've contributed 100,000 plus hours in service, and we were acknowledged for that by receiving the 2012 Take Pride in America Outstanding Federal Volunteer Program. So it's been a long trip. And so as you can see, or as I just mentioned, we have 3 islands that we're currently active on: Oahu, Hawaii Island, and Kauai. And we have sites located for our census around all the shores. It's numerous sites per shore. And so you can see some of them obviously are within the sanctuary boundaries. Others are not. They're on a variety of different properties, which represents just the cooperation we've been able to achieve across different organizations. We're in national parks, we're in public lands, we're in private lands, state parks. There's a number of different organizations that we're working with. So it really says a lot about the power of coming together for conservation in Hawaii. Yep, so yeah, 26 sites on Oahu we have. And our volunteers are able to choose from any site when they're asking to participate, so long as we have openings. There are some restrictions in terms of total number of people we can fit at some sites, but we're willing to accommodate our volunteers. And then these are our Hawaii Island sites. I forget how many exactly, I think 22 we have on Hawaii Island. Yep, 22 sites on any given year, again, around each coast. And then Kauai, we have 15 sites. So yep, almost all the shores. And then that gives us a good representative sample of where they are in relation to each shoreline. So methodology, why do we do it this way? What are we getting out of this? Well, we tend to structure it the same way each year and to follow the same procedures so that we have this consistent data collected from year to year. As I mentioned earlier, we do easy to understand data collection procedures so that all of our volunteers are able to contribute and participate to the best of their abilities. Like I said, the behaviors I covered earlier, those are the only ones that we are keeping track of during our study. Humpback whales have another other behaviors that they are known for, but we focus on just the ones that I've mentioned. And we also will group some of them together to just make it as simple and concise as possible. Like when our volunteers are looking for slaps, we don't distinguish between the tail slap or the pectoral slap. It's all just considered a slap behavior, a head lunge behavior, a breaching behavior. So we have that simplified procedure. It's conducted during the peak breeding season. So humpback whales are here from December to April. January and March is that peak period, and that's when we conduct our count. Consistent from year to year, same sites every year, same locations year to year, same methods every year. So just providing that consistent data set. And then we provide standardization, and we ensure that all of our volunteers have thorough training. And so this is a photo right here of our site leader training this past January over at our new offices on Ford Island. And so I sort of alluded to this earlier, but we have different types of volunteers that serve different but equally important functions. We have our site leaders, and they're in charge of leading any number of those 63 locations throughout the islands that I mentioned earlier. They receive extensive training in person by us at the sanctuary in order to lead that site confidently for all 3 months. They're stationed at that one location. And then, yeah, they will be the ones collecting our census data, and then at the end of the 3 months, they're the ones who send it to us. So it's almost like our next in line, like there are people in the field for getting this data back. And then we have general volunteers. They can go to any site they want for any of the 3 months, so they can bounce around, try out new locations. They receive training by our site leaders. Our site leaders pass along that information at the end of each, or at the beginning of each counting event. And they will be collecting the behavior data and the exact whale location data. And I'll be talking about later what those different types of data mean and what we can learn from them and how they're used. Okay, so the types of data that we're collecting, as I just mentioned, behavior data, that would be through the use of our behavior sheets, census data through the use of our census sheets, and exact whale location data through the use of our site map. Okay, behavior data. What are we getting from this? What is the purpose? The behavior data helps us distinguish general trends that may provide insight into the use patterns of a particular location. Again, consistent methodology, doing the same data collection each year. The way we do it is we have our volunteers working in pairs at a site so that we can have attention on the water at all times. One volunteer in the two-person team will be observing the water, looking for sightings and for behaviors, and they'll be communicating with their partner who will be recording. And then they'll be doing this in 30-minute periods, switching off throughout the 4-hour count. So there'll be a total of 8 intervals that we're collecting data in. And as I mentioned before, this is what we're looking for. And so they'll be observing for slaps, and that'll be either a peduncle slap, which is sort of a whipping motion of the back tail, the head slaps, pec slap with their pectoral fins, or a tail slap. Those would all be grouped together. And then they're also looking for breaches, they're looking for blows, and they're looking for dives. So these are all behaviors that they're diligently observing for the 4-hour count. And so this is what the raw data would look like. They're out there, the numbers are already filled in, but this would be an example sheet. And so you can see, again, we have it broken down into those 30-minute periods for the entire 4-hour count. And then they'll be recording the number of adults and the number of calves. And as I mentioned earlier, they're looking for the size of the blow and for the frequency to help determine whether it's an adult or a calf. They're also, within each period, looking for the total number of breaches. And so it's not specific to an individual, but it's just the total cumulative breaches between all of the animals present at that site at that time. And I should backtrack a minute by saying they're only recording these animals once during that period. So if we have a mark of 1 on there, that's just 1 animal. If we have 3, it's just 3 animals. If that same animal is resurfacing or reappearing, they're not counting it again. It's trying to get the exact amount of whales that are present there. And so the same goes for slaps, blows, and dives. And if they're not collecting data, they make a note of it so it's not misinterpreted as a count of 0. And then, yeah, that's the behavior data. Second type of data that we're collecting is census data. And the purpose of the census data is to get an estimate of the average number of whales present per site on a given day. And so this is to be completed by our site leaders. They're only doing this for 15-minute periods as opposed to the half-hour periods. And one of the main reasons for that is so that they can have the extra 15 minutes to go and speak with our volunteers and help them. And so they end up doing this for a total of 9 times. We tack on another 15 minutes, so they're there until 12:15 instead of 12. So 9 15-minute counts. And so the calves and adults are again marked separately. And again, only whales seen at the surface. If they believe there's a whale present in the area, they saw it dive down, and they're pretty sure it's there, that's not something we're looking for, just the whales as they surface. That's the only definite way to know. And so this would be what our census data looks like. So you can see it's only the front side of it, it extends onto the back, but basically we just use the tick marks to differentiate between the adults and the calves. And then if they're doing anything particularly interesting, maybe, I'm not sure if you're familiar with whale social groups, but if maybe it's a mother calf escort group coming down, they'll make a note of that, or if it's a competitive pod of males that are engaging in some sort of interesting behavior, then we'll record that too. And then we also have, sorry, as I go into my bag down here. We have our exact whale location data, which is through the use of our site maps. Okay, so this one, unlike the other two, is only from 8:30 until 11 a.m. And so we'll be completing one map per site to be completed by volunteers working in pairs. And they're indicating for this entire period the number of whales observed at this location, and also trying to make as many, or trying to distinguish the pod composition as well. And then from that, they're going to calculate how far away these animals are. So this would be an example of a completed site map. This center area would be blank when they receive it. And so in this upper portion, there's basically 6 criteria for visibility. Is it hazy? Is there fog? Is there high surf that's affecting your vision? And this, in a way, helps us to validate our census data by having something to compare it against. And then we also have the opportunity, based on the elevation, of determining how this elevation is affecting the viewer's observations. And then finally, it is possible for it to be spatially analyzed to potentially identify near-shore preferred habitats. And so the way it would work is the user or the volunteer would draw in a brief sketch of their site. They would mark their location. And then from 10:30 to 11, just through constant observing, they'll put a little circle where they spot each whale or group of whales. If it's a single individual, it's going to be a small circle. If it's a large group, like a mother calf group or a mother calf escort group, they get a larger circle. And then we estimate the distance to each animal on the line next to it. And so this, for example, this is you on the horizon. You'll be standing at your location. We provide the site's elevation to our volunteers beforehand, and they'll mark it off. Round down if they're sitting, round up if they're standing. We do it in intervals of 10. So assuming there's an elevation of 60 feet, we provide each of our volunteers with a very basic tool, this measuring stick here. And they would basically hold it at arm's length, about 2 feet away. And this top part, we've had it cut off at 0 right there. So it's like right at the 0 mark. You line that up with the horizon, and then you basically just slide this card up or down. And then so the green bar at the top lines up with the whale. And so you're using it between the gap, and then you're recording the increment in inches on that mark. So then you take that and you compare it with our reference table, and you move horizontally along this top row here, find your elevation of 70 feet, move vertically in the column, and you find the increment that you recorded on the ruler. And then again, you move horizontally over to that first row, and that's the distance to the whale. So it's pretty basic, but it's very helpful and accurate. So that's how we're getting the distances to the whales. And so when it's all, yep. And so yeah, when it's all said and done, what are we left with? And we have our results, and we get different types of results based on the different type of data. And so the first and probably the fastest that people might see, we get the quickest turnaround, is with our preliminary results. And so those can be available within 1 week of each count. This past count, I was working pretty late to get them up the night of, but it's basically just the raw data as we collect it, and it provides a set snapshot of how many whales were present at this site at this time. It's very basic and straightforward, such as that. And we'll make the difference between adults and calves. And also, we keep a record of it, so all of our results are cataloged online. So we have January on Oahu. And so let's find Hanauma Bay on here, which is where we are. So site 21. So just from this right off the bat, we can see that the highest number of sightings were right first thing in the morning, 8 to 8:15. We had 8 adults and 3 calves. So yeah, over time we can sort of see, and across sites we can see trends in when is the best time and location. And so this is all of Oahu here. Census data. And so this can be analyzed over a period of years to discern larger trends and can give indications of the use patterns and how it's affected by different weather conditions. And so this is our census data. This was done from a recent sort of assessment and analysis, and this is between 2005 to 2010. This is the census data, just basically what the data says, not really making any interpretations of it, but the raw data. So we can see that in general, January has had the highest number of sightings, followed shortly after by February and March, sort of neck and neck there, but then making a clear distinction between Kauai and Hawaii. And then you can also sort of see that Kauai has had the highest number of sightings. And here we have different type of census data. Here we have the average number of humpback whales sighted according to year. So looks like 2007 to 2009, Kauai had pretty much even numbers of sightings, all at about 4. Kauai again, for the most part, except in 2010, having the highest number of sightings. And then, yeah, Oahu and Hawaii shortly after. And then we can also look at it by time. And so we can see over the years, again, 2005 to 2010, we can sort of make predictions as to when might be the best time to spot a humpback whale. And so here for Kauai, it would be between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. would be first thing in the morning, the best time to see a humpback. If you're on Hawaii Island, the best time is from 9:30 to 9:45, so a little bit later. And then if you're here on Oahu, it would be 8:30 to 8:45. And so again, these are just what we've observed. And then most recently, we have sanctuary staff engaging in a 20-year meta-analysis of our historical data set. And so what is meta-analysis? It's basically using statistical modeling to sort of find these trends and the patterns and sort of in the variability and in the sightings across all of our sites and across time as well. So it's a very in-depth analysis of the data. One of those, or it might be useful for finding variability in our sites, and also identify the influence of covariate variables such as weather, wind, sun, all those things, and how they're influencing or having an influence on our dependent and independent variables. And so why are we doing this? What are we trying to figure out? One question that staff is trying to answer is, how have these settings varied across each site and over time? And how are the sightings being compared between sites at the same time? And finally, what sources of the variation, again, the weather, sun, wind, is most influential to sighting data? Okay, and the key objectives of this analysis, to evaluate the significance of existing ocean count sites for future monitoring, which sites are consistently having the highest numbers, which sites are having low numbers, should we continue at these sites, all of this to help the future of our project, and also understanding the influences of the variables to our sightings, and possibly to discern the maximum number of whale sightings across all sites at one time. So all useful tools. And yeah, that's, if you want to get involved, I'm sure some of you have already participated, but you haven't participated yet. This is our site. We have a lot of information about the site locations on there. All of our registration is available online at our website, sanctuaryoceancount.org. If you have any questions, this is my email. You can contact me. Yeah, and that's my office number if you want to get a hold of me there. And then one brief thing, I'm sure some of you might have heard about this, but we're currently in the process of a management plan review there at the sanctuary, expanding our resources to include more, sort of a more holistic approach to management. So our first public hearing is coming up of our draft environmental statement. And so if you want to attend, this is the date and location right there. Highly encourage you to go. Yep, and that's it. Yep.
Do you have any questions?
I think you were first, yeah. Oh, okay, those are tubercles, they're called, and that's actually where the humpback whale's hair comes from. Yeah, believe it or not, they have hair, and I think they all have blonde hair, believe it or not. And they all have blue eyes as well. Yeah, they're all blondes with blue eyes. Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. Question?
They have the sanctuary here at Hanauma Bay and then up in the North Shore.
Mm-hmm.
But in between, is there a reason why we're not counting or why those aren't sanctuaries too? Is there no feeding going on there or just
I do know that where we do have the sanctuary, those were the highest concentrations, and the reason for putting the sanctuary there, I think for various reasons, which I probably don't know enough to go into, possibly political reasons, we can't have the sanctuary around the entire island. There's regulations involved, certain like shipping routes that we just couldn't possibly interfere with. So we've included the most important areas in the boundaries. Yeah?
You can't see the underside of the tail. How do you count?
Say again?
How do you know you counted one unique individual versus 10? You can't see the underside of it.
That's a matter of using a volunteer's sort of like intuition and getting a sense. Most of these animals are not like just moving quickly through. Like you sort of get a sense of where they are and their location in relation to you. And sort of it's mostly intuition, I would say. It's not 100% exact, but I'd say it's pretty accurate.